and they have recently gone bankrupt. So we may be waiting quite a long time. However, the bar behind me is fully stocked, so at least we can pass the time quite merrily. Now, if you do fall in, the first thing I'm going to do is probably giggle at you, because I've already told you not to hang anything out the side, so you shouldn't fall in anyway. But if you do, I have got life rings on the top, but I'm not going to throw them to you because they're made of solid plastic. If it hits you on your head, you'll go into sleep. As I told you, it's only 3.5 foot deep, so just stand up and walk. You'll be fine. Now, we're just heading to Gas Street Basin. We're going to be turning around here and heading back that way. We've got to do this because we've not got a nice circular route to take you on, but it gives me a really good opportunity to tell you about the important history of this basin. Now, before I do, if you have a look at that pub on the right hand side, the black and white one, that place is going to be really famous because a couple of months ago they were filming the Peaky Blinders movie directly outside that pub. There was quite a few fireballs, so I've got a feeling it's going to be an integral part of the film. Anyway, enough about that. That black and white bridge directly in front of us, you'll notice there's a very short passage of water. That passage of water hasn't always been there, because there used to be a 6-foot piece of land that actually blocked off the two canals. It was known as the Worcester Bar, because basically it barred your progress. Our navigation company got here first, and they didn't even want that one existing, never mind sharing water with it. So that's why they left that piece of land there. But it meant if you're coming from that direction and you wanted to head that way, you're actually going to have to empty your entire boat and put it on another boat just 6 foot away. The problem is, you've only got one man driving the boat, and it's being pulled along by one horse. But the biggest problem was you can have up to 40 tons of goods on these. So if you got there and your boat's full, you're going to be a little bit annoyed. Well, that ridiculous situation went on for well over 20 years, because that's how long it took the two companies to actually come to an agreement. The agreement was they'd stick a lock in there, and Birmingham and Worcester would have to agree that any boat that went through it would pay Birmingham Canal Navigation Company the toll money. So it's all about money at the end of the day, isn't it? Now, this place hasn't all lined the canal that we're on today. It got its name Gas Street because of how important this little basin used to be. Now, that pub that I pointed out earlier hasn't always been a pub. Previously it was a lockkeeper's cottage. Now, it's the person's job that lived in that cottage to come out every day, operate the lock and take the toll money. The lock itself was 73 foot long, but the boats that were going through it was 71.5 feet long. So there was only a tiny little bit of wiggle room. These through a lock on my own at night, using the electric lighting we've got today. Never mind by candle, because you only need a little bit of wind when you're in the dark. I used to smoulder coal in that building. Smouldering coal releases natural flammable gases, which are then piped around the basin, giving it gas lighting, hence the name Gas Street. Now, there is actually 2 remaining original gas lamps in the basin. There's one just over there, and there is one just there. Now, believe it or not, they do actually still work to this day. However, they use LED lights now, not gas. A little bit safer anyway. Now, it was only the second place in the entire nation that actually had gas lighting, so it tells you just how busy this little basin actually used to be. Now, prior to these canals being open, the only way you could get your goods out to your customers was by horse and carts. The maximum amount you can get on a horse and cart is just over a ton, where the most you can get on one of these is 40 tons. Still only using one horse and one driver. So the canals are absolutely fantastic for transportation of goods. Now, we had coal, limestone and iron ore all in really close proximity, So the canals actually kick-started the Industrial Revolution, because it meant now we can transport these goods en masse. He called the Earl of Bridgewater. Now he was a mine owner, and he got a bit of a problem with those mines continuously flooding with water, because the further you dig down, more water comes in. So it's causing him problems getting this stuff out. So basically what he did was dig a massive trench to release the water from out the mine. Now when he saw the flow of water, it gave him a bit of an idea. That's where we get our name from, okay. Now Birmingham Canal Navigation Company, despite its name, was actually owned by a group of mine owners in the Black Country. And if can't tell from my accent, that's where I'm from. Now they saw the very successful first canal that opened in Manchester, and they wanted a piece of the pie. So they weren't stupid, they employed the same engineer that did that one to come over here and do this one in Birmingham. Now his original canal in Birmingham to those mines was 18.5 miles long, and the style of canal that he built is known as a contour canal. It basically followed the contours in the land as it wiggled. Easier to do because you don't have to dig any tunnels, and you don't have to dig such deep cuttings into the ground. Now, when this canal first opened in 1769, you might not be surprised that So, two horn signals means we're either sinking or we're turning left. Now, I can't hear Axel screaming at the back, so I presume we're turning left. Now, we've got to use these horn signals because we're licensed by the Coast Guard. So 2 means we're turning left, 1 means we're turning right, and 1 long one means we're going through a bridge or a tunnel. Problem is though, the majority of people that are on boats have no idea what those signals mean, and the guys that are in canoes definitely haven't got a clue what those signals mean. They just think we're telling them off every time we press that horn. So yeah, when this thing was built, they didn't have any mechanical equipment like diggers or bulldozers, so all of this was done by hand, because all they had at their disposal was pickaxes, shovels and wheelbarrows. Now, I can only imagine how difficult that work would have been, because I'm quite a big bloke. I actually got blisters on my hands just for getting fence posts out in my garden. Never mind having to do something like this. You've only got to look from one side of the canal to the other. It would take us like a hell of a long time just to dig a trench. Now, what you might be surprised at though, is this work was predominantly done by children under the age of 13. Because if you were a girl at 13 years of age, you could then go and work in the mines. Now, if you were a boy, however, it's 11. Now, during the cholera outbreak, that life expectancy dropped even further to just 16. Now, believe it or not, it only took these kids 2 years to complete the entire 18.5-mile canal. I think that's phenomenal, because not only is it done by kids, it was also done by hand. I struggle to get my kids to tidy the room, never mind work as hard as it would have had to have been on these canals. Now, James Bryn, true story. Now, I like to think of it, he was waiting for all this money to come into his back pocket, and when it finally did, he went out with his mates on a bit of a bender, partied a little bit too hard and kept it. But what you got to remember is he was 56, your average life expectancy was only 22, so he was actually doing all right. But the difference is he was from aristocracy, so he'd already got plenty of money in his pocket. He wasn't working in these canals, and he definitely wasn't working in those mines. He actually died of a reoccurring infection, and I believe it was pneumonia. Now, if you have a look around here, you'll notice the majority of these buildings are fairly new. They actually started building these in the late 80s, early 90s. Now, what you've got to remember is, you would never have had a single residential property that would have lined the canal. Because if you owned a factory, no matter what it was you were making, You want it to be as close to the canal as humanly possible. Because if you weren't, you were still having to get your goods out by horse and carts. And you'd need at least 30 horses and at least 30 men to get the same out as just one of these boats. So that's whether it was a house or it was a factory, they all burnt coal. So you can imagine that the air quality wasn't exactly the best. They actually had a saying back then which was black by day and red by night. Black by day because of all of this coal being burnt, it would leave a thick smog in the air and it would quite literally block out the sun. And red by night because of all of these furnaces burning, it would leave a red haze on the horizon. The Black Country was called the Black Country because the majority of the smog was in that area, meaning the majority of the soot landed there, making everything look black. Now, on the day that this canal opened, the price of coal plummeted to less than half it was the day before. Now, we know this because we've got awesome written records in this country, but you've not got to feel sorry for those mine owners though, because they're making way more money than they ever have done previously, because they're making at least a 30 times saving on their transportation costs. Now, I've been looking for that business plan my whole adult life and I've not managed to find it yet. Now, if anybody has any questions as we're going around, feel free to ask. My knowledge is quite good. However, if I don't know the answer, I'll just Google it. So we'll find out together. Yeah, I've seen a few swans in this area that are really early because they're like still babies, aren't they? Yeah, yeah. Foot long. So if anything was coming out of the bridge on the left hand side, by the time Axel had seen it, would have already had the accident. However, we can only go a maximum of 4 miles an hour. So even if we did have an accident, you're not going to get a whiplash or anything like that. Our insurance would be fine. The worst thing that would happen is a couple of bags of crisps might fall off the shelves, but that'd be about it. Now, the canals were basically the motorway of their day, and just like the motorway, they had exactly the same problems. They became heavily congested, so they needed to make improvements. Now, they couldn't use James anymore to do those improvements because he partied a little bit too much. So they needed a new engineer. Now, the engineer that they chose to do the work is a guy called Sir Thomas Telford. Now, some of you might recognise the name because he's quite a prolific engineer in this country. He's done the aqueduct in Llangol and Wales. He's done loads of different bridges. He's got a town named after him. I bet you can't guess what that town's called. It's not Thomas. Yeah, it's Telford. So anyway, they chose to use him. Some of the improvements you can actually see here. One of those is we're much wider. So we've gone from being 20 to 30 feet in width up to 80 feet in width in some places. Now, he's not done this so you can line the boats up and have a race. Although when the diesel engine came in, you can guarantee that that did happen. What he's done is he's created a reservoir for the canal itself. Because what you need to remember is every time you operate a lock, and he's pulling you along, the rope that was attached to the horse would be dipping in and out of the water and getting wet, and mud, it would get mud in it, and grit would get into the rope, and it would act like sandpaper on the bridges as it's being pulled along. If you have a look at the handrail of this bridge, you'll notice that there's significant damage on there. Now, that damage has been caused by thousands of horses pulling these boats along. You'll see that damage at virtually every single canal bridge in the country. On some of the bridges as well, on the corner of the brickwork, you'll see deep grooves in rope shapes, because that's where a horse has pulled you around the corner. Now you might have noticed in Birmingham there is quite a lot of graffiti, yeah? Well, a few years ago our king came to visit Birmingham before he was king. So the council decided to get rid of all the graffiti along the king's route, and they did. It was really clean and there wasn't a single piece of graffiti to be seen at all until the night before he arrived. Now, in the middle of the night, really early hours, just before the king got here, somebody decided to paint a huge message for the king about his brother, Andrew. Yeah, if you've read any of the papers, you might guess what it said. Don't think the king found it very funny, but we certainly did. Now, another improvement that Sir Thomas Telford has made is coming up to view directly in front of us. Because you'll notice now the canal is virtually arrow straight. Because Tom did not follow the contours in the land. He went as straight and as quick as possible from Birmingham to those mines in the Black Country. So instead of the journey being 18.5 miles long, it's now just over 8 miles in length. You'll be able to see the difference between the two canals, because if you look under this bridge on your left, you'll see James Brinley's original contour canal. It's much narrower and it twists around the corner, where Tom's, as you can see, is a lot wider and it is perfectly straight. Now, by cutting 10 miles off your journey, it doesn't actually sound like much, but when you can only go 4 miles an hour, you're looking at least a 2.5 hour saving on the trip. But 95% of these boats are actually doing a round trip, so you're looking at least a 5 hour saving. Now that saving was never going to benefit the driver, it was only ever going to benefit the big man, the mine owners, because they don't have to pay so much in wages. Now in a minute we're going to be making a left-hand turn. When we do, we're going to take up the entire canal, so we're going to do it really slowly. We're going to go under a bridge that was built in 1854. It's got the damage on the handrail, it's also got the deep grooves in the corner of the brickwork, but if you look in the towpath on either side, you'll notice that there's a rectangle cutting. Those rectangle cuttings were put into the towpath just before the Second World War. And once we've made the turn, I'll let you know what they were used for. And just to let you know, if we are going to touch anywhere, this turn is probably going to be the one, because it is really tight. However, you are completely safe. Just thought I'd let you know. Just don't leave anything dangling there. Right, I just need to go. Those rectangle cuttings were put into the towpath just before the Second World War. And what would happen is, during the Second World War, ladies would come out at every single canal bridge in the country and they would slot thick oak wooden planks into those cuttings, and they dam off every bridge. This area is called Ladywood, which isn't the most affluent of areas in Birmingham. However, the property developers are trying to say that it's Edgbaston because they're after £500,000 per property. but it's definitely ladywood. Now, anybody know what night soil is? Yeah?
Toilet.
Yeah. So night soil is well, to put it politely, human waste. Okay? Now, prior to the sewers being connected in Birmingham, where do you think they used to dump that? No, it was actually on that piece of land there. But for some reason, they've actually left it out of the sales brochure. But I have heard that the roses do grow really well. Now, if we are going to see any herons, kingfishers or otters, they will be in this area. Because there is no towpath, they do feel a lot safer, because the only way to get down here is by boat, so just keep your eyes peeled. Now, you are more than likely to see herons. You probably would see a kingfisher, but if you spot an otter, please let me know.
There's a magpie as well.
So, another improvement that Sir Thomas Stafford has done is directly in front of us, because just past that bridge you'll see there's a grass verge. Now, that grass verge is not natural, it is completely man-made, because behind it there's a reservoir that contains 1.5 billion litres of water. It's known as Edgbaston Reservoir, however it used to be called Rotten Park Reservoir after the Rotten Park deer hunting grounds. Now, the only reason that that reservoir was built was so you can keep topping the water up on the canal. So that tells you just how important these normally. But for some reason that's where he tends to want to perch. So that slope on the right hand side is actually where they release the water from the reservoir onto the canal to this day. They tend to do that in the summer because this time of year now the building on the right hand side doesn't look like much, but as we go past, if you have a look back, it's got some it's ice. It's got some quite cool arch windows in it. It's colloquially known as a BCN cottage, but you're probably more familiar with the term lockkeeper's cottage. There was 177 of these cottages built. We're now down to just 64 due to the passage of time. Now, it was the person's job that lived in that cottage to come out every single day with a wooden ruler and measure the distance between the waterline and the towpath. By doing that, you'd know whether you've got to put more water into the canal or not. You might not be surprised though, they don't send anybody out with a wooden ruler these days. Now, this boat on the right hand side called Scorpio is a ridiculously rare boat. If you have a look at its serial number, you'll notice that it says 534. So that tells you just how old that thing is. So that would have been built in the mid-1800s. There was only about 12 of those boats made. The reason it's so rare is because it was designed to carry chemicals. And it's got a really unique feature at the bottom of its hull. There's actually a plug in it, just like you'd find in your sink at home, but on a much bigger scale. Because if ever those chemicals caught fire, they would simply pull the plug and let it sink, because it was the... I believe there's only about 2 in existence now, and that's one of them. What I'm going to do now is just start to tell you about some of that's destroying our heritage, and it's that plant there coming out that wall. It's called Buddleia. Now, it's a non-native invasive species that was brought over from China by the Victorians. Now, you can't blame them really, because they just saw a pretty plant and they wanted it in the garden. But the problem is, as you can see, it will literally grow out of your walls. And when it does grow, it's a very thick and woody growth, and it'll break open because it will spread like wildfire. The problem is we can't get rid of it. All we can do is cut it back, because the only thing that will kill it is a really strong herbicide, and we can't use that on the water. But if you look on the left just there, you'll see the damage that it causes, because that crack in that wall is caused by buddleia. Now, when you first got on the boat, I said, don't worry if we sink, it's only 3.5 foot deep. Originally, it was dug to a 6 foot depth. So we've actually lost 2.5 feet worth of depth through the passage of time. The problem is though, we can't dredge it out to get it back to its original depth because of how heavily industrialised the area was. We had huge chemical works in this area, and for the first 100 years of this canal being in operation, every single factory just opened their valves to release their waste products directly into the canal. So we've still got highly toxic waste right at the very bottom. Luckily, that's all covered by silt. However, if we were to dredge it out, all of that would rise to the top, kill all the insects, the fish would disappear, and we wouldn't get to see any of the wildlife anymore. Now, I'm going to shut up for a little bit because there's not much for me to talk about around here other than Lego houses. When we get past the next bridge, I'll carry on.
Do you know what that old bridge is?
Yeah, they used to make water tanks.
There was also like this little boat that was all rusty and half of it was sunk in the water.
That is called a butty boat. So a butty boat is a boat that was designed never to have an engine. Okay, so that boat would have had to have been pulled along by oars. All right. So yeah, it's a butty boat. It's an old boat that would have carried either coal, limestone, or iron ore. Is that all right? Careful because we lost electrics this morning, so I've had to put an extension lead across, but I have taped it to the floor. But it was the only way I could get the till to work this morning. Starboard is right, you always bow to the front, so your stern's at the back. And it's basically the electrification of the railway, because we can only go a maximum of 4 miles an hour, and we can only carry a maximum of 40 tons, where the trains can go at least 10 times that speed, carrying at least 10 times that weight.
Oh, what? Sorry, don't worry.
But it didn't kill the canals off though, because it was impractical to have a train station at every single factory. So you still needed the boats to do the 1 and a bit mile journey to and from the train station ports. Now you might have noticed that the train tracks tend to run parallel to the canals. The reason for this is the canal companies had already flattened the land out, so it just made sense for the railway to take advantage of that. Now, if you have a look under this bridge on your left hand side, you'll notice there's a very short section of canal, because that is one of the original train station ports. So your boat now would just pull up in there and either load or unload at the train. They only use it now for a bit of fishing and some barbecues. We actually rescued a puppy out of there a couple of months ago. In the spring it's really picturesque. So what did kill the canals off virtually completely is actually the improvements in road haulage. Because now all you need to do is fill up, and on the other side there was a steelworks. As soon as the improvements in road haulage were made, they filled them in and they bricked them up. Where you have space for your boats, you've now got space. What you did was convert an old industrial narrow boat into one of the very first livable boats in the country, and it's a boat called Cressy. Up to the first floor, where you can see pictures and videos of how life would have been like during the Industrial Revolution. And it's coming up to view right now on your left hand side, and it's called the Roundhouse for quite obvious reasons really, because it's not square, it's very round. It's actually built in a horseshoe shape. If you've got a spare 15 minutes, I'd highly recommend to go and see it. It is completely free, but it doesn't take very long to do. You might want to choose a different day though, because it seems to be closed. If you like gin, the pub next to it, called the Distillery, actually distills their own gin on the very top floor. I'll warn you now though, the prices aren't as reasonable as what you'd get on here, but we don't make our own gin. Now, we have actually come to the end of the tour. I really hope you've enjoyed some of the sights, and I really hope you've enjoyed your history lesson. We're a family-run business, and we've been...
Thank you guys, thank you for watching, and that was our boat cruise. That's the one that we won just a few minutes ago, and this is where I am, the city of Birmingham. It doesn't cost much, it only costs £6.50 for a 1 hour journey. 1 hour on the boat cruise. Very informative, a lot of history about the canal. Yeah, so anyways, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video. Right, let's keep exploring the city of Birmingham.